generally speaking, if you're just going by feel, even if you're going by heart rate or power, here's the deal. If you feel like you're going just about right, you're probably going too fast. If you feel like you're going too slow, you're probably going just about right. And it is a huge practice in patience and execution of restraint, because all you're thinking of is, how can I finish this race faster? And it's so counterintuitive to think slowing down will actually, in fact, allow myself to finish this race faster.
Hey, what's happening? You're back in the saddle.
Back in the saddle. Feels like it's been like 3 weeks since we did a podcast.
A little rusty.
I know, I'm a little rusty. Hope I can. I'm definitely going to have to do my best to negative split this puppy, because I definitely feel a little bit out of it. But yeah, welcome. It's a Tuesday, which is not our normally casting day. We usually try to shoot out this podcast on Monday. And hey, if it's your first time listening, we appreciate you joining us. And welcome aboard the Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 295.
Yes, it is.
See, at least I'm back with the episodes. I took a little sabbatical over the weekend. Took a little vacation, took some time out, and purposefully did not bring any podcast equipment with me.
Ooh.
Therefore, I wouldn't. Yeah, I knew we were going to be traveling back on Monday. Didn't want to be pressured into getting up early or doing it and shifting things, so I didn't take it with me, and I knew you'd be more than receptive to that, and I appreciate your flexibility. But yeah, I would say I apologize for not having it on Monday, but hey, as long as we churn it out twice a week, I'm pretty happy with that, and we've done that for, as we said, 295 episodes and going on 3 years here in October. So yeah, we appreciate you joining us, and thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thank you for your patience. I think it's all right.
Yeah, I think it is too. And yeah, took a little vacation with the family down to Florida, back to some of Allie's roots. She has spent a lot of her life in Fort Walton, and she's got some good friends there. So we just kind of unplugged and lived it up hardcore. Got my oil changed in the car, washed it, got 2 massages, and just relaxed and did not much of anything. The vacation itself was great. I will say, though, that from a timing standpoint, it couldn't have been any better, but also couldn't have been any worse, because I got back yesterday from vacation where we lived it up a little bit, had a few fun things to eat, and then you get your team kits in and you got to try them on, and let's just say, I got a little bit of work to do to kind of even things out a little bit over the next few weeks. But no, it was good. It was definitely perfectly timed, and
I need a picture. Kit picture.
You need one of those like pictures where you stick the cell phone out, you take a picture. Nah, yeah, buddy, that ain't happening.
Why you're looking in the mirror and you're taking a selfie back at
right.
yourself?
Listen, I don't want to harm anyone else's retinas, because it would be something to not behold right now. But
hey, listen. So we missed yesterday. I couldn't help but think about, equivalating this to a missed workout or something. It's similar. And we've got a lot of people obviously going to have some big races coming up, but we have a lot of people that are sort of off season for themselves. They've been through their race season. And I was talking to somebody last night about how, they're going to be struggling this week because they don't have a race coming up, but they're just trying to stay with it. And that's all I said was like, miss a day, just throw it away. And we were just talking about that, so we're, apologizing. But don't apologize, just forget about it and move on.
Toss it and move on.
The key is to keep sort of coming back and staying in the game. And that's sort of what I feel like this feels like right now. It's like, well, because it would have been easier, not easy, but not for us because we're in this thing. But just think if all of a sudden we let it go till Wednesday, and then every once in a while we just don't do it till Thursday. The key is just to do it. Do something.
Well, the key is to, here's the thing: is like the key is to continue increasing good habits, not creating bad habits. And one day off doesn't mean you're creating a bad habit, And just let me say this now, because I've gotten a couple emails the last few weeks from either inquiring athletes or current athletes that I work with, and they're like, how do you approach the, quote unquote off season? Or what do you do, and how do you even train during this? And you're like, first of all, like, can we just not say the word off season anymore? Like the last thing that you need to look at this is an off season. Like, and well, yes, are there differences in being or in getting closer to a race and further away from a race? Absolutely. But if there's just this like, overarching theme when people look at, quote unquote off season. And we talked about this, around this time last year, or maybe a little bit later in the year, as we like to call it Q4 and Q1, which are, listen, if you're in the sport and you're training, and the majority of the athletes I work with on a year-round basis, it's like, yeah, is the volume going to be decreased? Absolutely. Is the focus of what you're working on going to be different? Absolutely. But the name of the game is always one thing: get better. And that's going to look differently by how we're doing it on specific times of the year. Because, right now I've got athletes who they're not racing until, next June. And they already know that. But we're still working out, because the point is to always try to get better, not to take a step back. You want to be more flexible with your time. You might even want to have like a couple choice days thrown in there. Like, that's something I like to do this time of year, is still keep structure, because you want to keep maintaining your strengths and also and also improving on your weaknesses. You don't want to just let them go by the wayside and just make them your weaknesses and your strengths for forever. You kind of want to bridge that gap and bring them all together as best you can. But I might throw, like, on a Sunday, I might just like label it choice day. Like, just make this day whatever you want to. If you want to go ride. If you want to go spend time with the family, spend time with the family. If you want to go for a run. Just keep it flexible that way. Because what happens with most people, like, the biggest difference is a lot of athletes see when they go from off season, quote unquote. I'm gonna quit calling it. I don't know what to call it.
Well, because it's different for everybody. So
yeah, just say, when you're not in like a specific block focusing on a race. I just find like a short.
And that's real. That's sweet. I like that. We'll use that.
Yeah, that'll be real catchy. We'll just copyright that, like Endurance Nation or something. So when you're not in a focus block getting ready for a race, the reason that things need to be flexible is not just physically, but also just like mentally and emotionally. Like being in a place where you feel like you have to adhere to a specific schedule and nail workouts because you're getting closer and closer and closer. It's like, it's like the month before your final exams of your semester. Like that's what being in a race specific block feels like, versus the first couple of weeks of like your semester. You're kind of like, I could be a little bit flexible. I definitely need to get my work done because I don't want to get behind, right? Like, you don't want to come up to me and be like, dude, I've skipped too many classes. Now I have no idea what I'm doing. So I got to drop the class, or I got to start, really put myself under the gun to like really try to focus and try and catch up. You don't want to do that either. You just kind of want to be like, show up to class, do your work. You don't have to be so, you don't have to feel like everything is a must, And so I think it's the most important thing that time of year is just to mentally and emotionally kind of relax and allow yourself to be free and to be flexible and to make some decisions on your own, as an athlete. I think that time of year is a great time to learn as well. And because you're farther away from a race specific block or a race. And so if you're being coached or you're self-coached, it's a good time of year to just kind of, I don't want to say experiment, but go through some, like, maybe some growing pains and learning how to pace differently, or learning to go harder than you thought you could before. And I wouldn't recommend it right now in August because it's like freaking blazing hot and it's easy enough to dig a hole right now. But I just think it's a good time of year to kind of, explore and do things. But it's always good to have a focus, and you should always have some kind of purpose to what you're doing. It can be just to maintain and not take any steps backwards, or it could be to improve your run. It could be to improve your bike. Like I have some people right now on run blocks. I have some people on cycling blocks. Some people focusing on swimming. And it's all about what they need to get better on, because the name of the game is starting each year better than you left it the last. And you need to focus on that. And so it's easy. And while the recipe might be different, the end meal, I guess, as you say, like, is to always have something taste better or be better as you go on. So, I think if you find yourself in that spot, and again, like, I know it's difficult, I think, because right now is the most difficult time because everyone else you probably know is focusing on race. And you're like, well, I don't know what I have to focus on. So what should I do? I guess I should just do nothing. Doing nothing is never the right answer. Unless you're hurt, doing nothing is never the right answer. Just be more flexible. But still, everyone thrives and performs and focuses better when they have a specific purpose, when they have some direction. Not because most people, when they have a direction, they will do it. And even if it's like 6 hours a week, it's still focused and it's still purposeful. It's not just lazy. I'm going to take, the next month or two off of just being really, flexible and not just I'm going to recharge. And the next thing you know, that 2 months off becomes your habit. And it's really hard to break when you do something that extended. So I would just kind of, a word of caution to the athletes who want to take that much time off is, listen, it's fine to take time off. Everyone needs it, but I think the longer, just with anything, it's like the person is like, yeah, I'm going to take a semester off of college. I'm just going to kind of go find myself. I'm just going to take a semester off. Yeah. How'd that go for you? Did you ever go back? Most people didn't. They're like, yeah, then it's kind of hard. And then I just kind of like my life without it. And so just be cautious with it. And again, it's a more difficult time of the year, I think, just because you've got everyone else focusing on races and you're not, so you kind of feel out of the loop. But your loop is what's the most important. Your focus and the things you want to accomplish next year are the most important. I think I even mentioned this on a podcast a few weeks ago, is that right now you should be thinking on, this is my prep season, or prep block for what I want to accomplish in 2020. Because again, it's all about, there is no expiration date. Your athletic achievements and your training improvements don't just, end and then restart on December 31st and January 1st. Like, it just keeps going, and so you want to keep that, not that motivation, I guess, per se, but like, you just want to keep that momentum.
Yeah.
And keep that going. And it might not be as great. It can be a little smaller, but just do your best to keep it.
Yep. Gone are the days when the players showed up to spring training with a beer belly and just kind of worked their way into shape. Like, everybody all the time is like kind of maintaining, and we've obviously seen that is the best strategy. I think that this idea of the name of the game is to get better also applies in I'm finding in my taper here, as I begin my taper for my race, but that doesn't come from a physical standpoint as much as mental. Like, I'm trying to figure out, how do I get better at little things. Like Sunday, I had that 4-hour recovery ride after a long bike on Saturday, for example, right? Mm-hmm. I went out to the airport.
Yeah, man, dude, don't become the guy that laughs at their own joke before they tell it to everybody.
Well, no, it's an insider, because not a lot of people know what it is, and what. I mean, to ride, 4 hours of loops around a 1.2 mile track is
mind-numbingly awful.
Under zero shade. It was the hottest time of the day, because I started slow. I just wasn't feeling it. I couldn't get up and get motivated when it was a little bit cooler. But the whole thing for me was an exercise of patience. I looked at it as, and I think a lot of times, because I text you, I was really proud of myself for actually doing a quote-unquote recovery ride. Mm-hmm. Because it's so hard to do, because people don't, they can't find the, it's almost like you can't see really the value in it,
Right.
It's hard to, kind of juxtapose that in your head. But I got to thinking about it. I was like, okay, how do I use this as, like, because you want to go fast, especially out there. You want to go faster all the time. It was every time I came around every corner, I wanted to throw the hammer down. So I just kept thinking about it in terms of, all right, well, 4 hours of this, how do I get mentally to the next, 15 minutes? Or, I was doing that thing like we do on race course day a lot of times, is break it into sections that you can handle.
Right.
And you don't do that a lot, during your main block and stuff like that. I don't think, because you're intervals and you're in and out of stuff and you're kind of doing all that. But so that's what I've been really thinking about as I get into my taper, is like, how can I mentally really pull back, work on that patience piece, and just execute within myself. And it's been interesting, because I've been doing it a few times now, and that was probably the most glaring example of it. but how valuable that can be to get a little bit better during taper without having to, shred your muscles.
Well, it's also a huge exercise in restraint.
Yeah. Well,
and like in what you did,
big time, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, but that's also why it's really, really great practice for race day.
Yeah, I just don't think people think about like Z1 and Z2 stuff like that, and I think that is a huge part of it, is the restraint, like you just said.
And because I mean, again, like when you go on race day, especially if you're going if you're going really, 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 really far, and you're doing something like, depending on like what kind of what kind of effort or intensity you're doing for a 70.3 or full, like it's all about restraint, and regardless of what, again, duration or intensity, it's all about execution, and restraint and execution almost always go hand in hand. They're almost together. When in every kind of scenario you can think about, in terms of from the moment you get in the water, the swim, to the time you're ready to like pull the trigger on the run, it's restraint, restraint, restraint. I feel good, or as I kind of write in like my standard like Ironman email, it's like, generally speaking, if you're just going by feel, even if you're going by heart rate or power, here's the deal. If you feel like you're going just about right, you're probably going too fast. If you feel like you're going too slow, you're probably going just about right. And it is a huge, huge practice in patience and execution of restraint, because all you're thinking of is, how can I finish this race faster? And it's so counterintuitive to think slowing down will actually, in fact, allow myself to finish this race faster. Because if you just saying it out loud sounds asinine. Like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. But when it comes to pacing and execution and how you've prepared and how long the day is, and again, this is for 70.3, and well, it's every race, depending on, even Olympics, for depending on like what kind of intensity level you're racing at, it's like you've only got this maximum level of intensity and energy to distribute over the course of the whole day. It's about either playing the even game, where you even it out as best you can, or you save as much as you have for the end and then rip it, versus blowing it out too early and then you've got nothing, because the return on investment is like zero. And that's the give and take, and that's the practice on execution that you have to have. And so like this last weekend, we had 4 athletes doing Ironman Mont Tremblant in Canada, and one particular athlete that I gave, and this generally pretty much happens every single time, is I gave him. We were talking about what kind of average power, normalized power we were going to have for the race, and I gave him his numbers, which are almost like traditionally way lower than the athlete like thinks that they're going to go. I told him, 170 was as close as I want you to get, and with a max like normalized power of 180. That'd be like if you're feeling totally awesome. But here's the deal: you're not even allowed to even go there until mile 80. Like once you figure yourself, and he was like, all right, it sounds good. I was actually thinking like 180 to 200. So that was way above, or that his projection was way above what I would have even thought. But especially for this athlete, and this is, again, like comes down to knowing your athletes and knowing what their strengths are, is this athlete is a really, really good runner. And I knew that I had no idea what he'd be capable of on the day, because he's only done 170.3, which was last year. And this is his first Ironman. And your first one is usually just it's the toughest. It's like it's such a hard distance to figure out. But as a coach, like you have to, because I think we did Boulder 70.3 last year together, and he did okay. I think he did like a 505 time, and then ended up running like 738s for the half, which is solid. But I think we bonked it on nutrition. I think we just messed up on pacing. And so knowing him, it's just like, all right, if you wanted to have your best performance, so however that ends up, if we want to have your best performance and give yourself the best opportunity late in the game to have your best day, we have to save some time for that. No, not time, rather. We have to save some energy for that. So in turn, you're actually losing quote unquote, a little bit of time on the bike. So let's say you lose 5 minutes on the bike only to gain 15 minutes on the run. And so he ended up actually biking a little bit less than what I told him to. And he ran himself from like 30 something down to 5th and onto the podium at Tremblant. And he ended up running faster in that marathon than he did at that half marathon last year. He ran like 7:20s.
What a race, man!
He said it was the perfect race. Like, I can't imagine it being any more perfect. And those rarely ever happen. I think we actually said that like last week in a podcast. Like, you have this like one perfect grammar, everything goes in your favor. You nail nutrition, you nail everything else. But it's about pacing. And like, I can't help but imagine, like, all right, what if I'd have been like, all right, go for 200. And then you might come off the bike 10 minutes faster, but then you ended up 20 minutes slower on the run. And I had like the second fastest marathon in his age group, and probably one of the fastest overall. I mean, just an insane marathon to have on that course after that bike ride. But it's, again, you have to be smart and you have to be persistently, persistently resistant in terms of your thinking, in terms of I need to push it. I don't. I need to save it because I want to be the best when I need to be the best, because the name of the game and the confidence you have to have, which is, again, what's so hard for people to understand and wrap their mind around, is I want to be my strongest when you're at your weakest, because we can battle even. And I'll let you take some of the early kind of battles, if you will, on the bike. But if you're wanting to win the war, per se, and using that analogy, like on the whole day, it's like I'd much rather go at you when I'm at my strongest and you've totally fallen by the wayside and you've totally spent it. Because, again, if you think about it, and I have to tell myself this every single time, like, that I track athletes at a race, none of it matters. None of it. None of it matters at all. Because the day is so long, so many things can happen. It's the bike. Let me go on. The bike isn't irrelevant. But it almost is, because 26 miles, like, think of it, like you can come off the bike. This athlete, for example, like if you're on iron track and you use it and you're tracking people, when you look at people's splits, it only even gives you till down to 25th. If you kind of look at like the age group leaderboards, it only goes down to 25th on the leaderboard for each individual bike split. He was never even on that. He was never even in the top 25 on the bike at any point at all. So none of it matters, because the last half marathon he jumped from like 17th to 5th. But again, so like as a coach, I got to remind myself that. But as an athlete, it's such a great lesson in terms that like 1 minute, like 1 minute difference, the difference between a 10.5 minute mile and a 9.5 minute mile is over 26 minutes. That's forever in a race. And think about how much harder you would have to push on the bike to gain 26 minutes. Like,
that's a lot.
It's huge. But it's people, like, again, they don't
over a mile an hour for sure.
Oh, easily
2 miles an hour almost.
No, it's probably close. It's probably a mile and a half over the course of 112.
Yeah,
it's probably a mile. Yeah, which is a ton. A mile an hour. So you're looking at you're looking at around 5.56 miles off the coming off the bike earlier. But again, it's like it's about playing your cards right all day, right? And you have to be so patient in that and so focused in that you're not willing to make stupid decisions. And I think that, again, you have to be so focused and practice that in training and know your body and know the point of the race and be so confident in your ability to be able to do it when it matters, which, again, not everyone has. And I think, specific training styles and even just methods, like, they don't necessarily they don't set you up for success to have ever felt that. Like, again, like, that's why I'm such a huge, like, I'm so anti doing these like 25 mile runs, because I would argue, and I would love to see some, like, anything that would show me different, is that I would I would venture to say that no one gets faster from mile 1 to mile 25. It gets slower and more painful, and it hurts. So all you're doing is reinforcing and allowing yourself to do the same level of fitness and just present that same speed for that longer period of time. You're not really getting faster. You're just going a little bit slower for longer. But what you also remember is this is just going to hurt the whole time, and I'm not going to get any faster, nor do I have the ability to lift the pace. But and a huge reason why I like to, 2 reasons why I'm a huge fan of negative split long runs, and split runs. Is negative split runs obviously are so a run, like I might have an athlete run, like one of my favorite ones is 2 hours and 20 minutes. And you spend the first hour and a half of that 220 just super chill. Just feeling it out. Just get loose, because again, if you're doing that run, you're more than likely already carrying some like major fatigue, and what you don't want to do is start out too early, or start out going too hard too early, and then just end up having a really terrible run. And then so you spend the first hour and a half just kind of going chill and feeling itself out, and then after 90 minutes, if you're feeling good, then you can bump from zone 3 to zone 4, not pace, but just feel effort wise. What that does is, it allows you to feel what it's like to raise the effort to either maintain pace or increase it on tired legs. But then when you're done and you realize that you were just able to pick up the pace on a 2 hour and 20-minute run covering whatever amount of miles on tired legs, you're like, dude, I can do this. So when you nail those in and you execute those properly and you nail the nutrition, you're like, dude, I could have kept going. And you look back at how much fatigue you built up in your body. So when it comes on a race day and you're thinking, all right, I got to be patient on the run or on the bike, and you've done those runs, you can think, yeah, I do have to be patient because I know I'll be able to run faster when everyone else is slowing down and walking. But if you haven't done runs like that, then you're thinking, I've got to push the bike because I know the run's just going to be terrible and suck. And it's just a different mentality to take into a race and not having practiced or felt that or had that confidence boost.
What's kind of ironic or interesting about that is that most people try to do or end up doing those long runs because they want to build confidence. But what you just said is it's a different kind of confidence. It's just like, so, okay, I can do it, or, I can get there because I've sort of just proven that I ran 24 miles or whatever. But what you're saying is like you're building a real different kind of confidence in the sense that, hey, when going gets tough, I can figure out a way to get, find more energy or find more effort. And that's the sort of stuff that's the whole negative split, thing, is that when you don't think you got it, if you plan for it and you practice it and you get used to it, that's what I'm kind of finding out too. But I want to throw out a hypothetical for you on that bike idea that you're talking about, though, because that example from our athlete at Mont Tremblant, obviously he's a good runner, like a good runner, but sometimes somebody say that is a decent runner and they want to end up at 5th or whatever like that, and they may not, if they don't get off the bike if they're not in the top 25, there's probably no way that they can get there. So what I'm getting at is, what about these fine lines in the mix of how far do you want to push it, and how far can you challenge it a little bit to get put yourself in a little bit better position? And do you know what I'm saying?
I think I know what you're saying, but the game plan is still the same. So even if someone is a much better cyclist than they are a runner, you still, in order for them to more than likely place themselves in the best position, or have, because what you're really trying to do, no matter what, is you're not thinking about them placing, because the placing is just going to end up the way it's going to end up. The way the competition is, the way the conditions are, the way the athlete. But the only thing you can control is the athlete's execution and giving themselves the best opportunity to have their best race possible. So even the guy that might be a stronger cyclist, that's even more reason to just still stay patient and race his race, because he's still going to be faster, having not pushed his intensity and effort as high as others, still coming off the bike a little bit ahead. But what you still want to allow him to do is run his best. Even if his run is decent, you still want him to be able to run his best run. Because if let's say he pushes and puts 5 minutes into it, then all the more reason for a guy who can't run that well, he's probably going to suffer more than a guy who can run well. And so you really want him to have the most energy possible to put his best run out there.
Right.
And again, when it comes down to, it all comes back down to the back half of the marathon. I mean, you can lose 15 to 20 minutes just on the back half of a marathon. And that's if you're chasing somebody. That's if you're trying to get on the podium and trying to have some specific result. That's where things fall apart. And again, I think he made up some of these guys 17 to 20 minutes just on the back half of the marathon, and that's so much time. Again, everything is cumulative. It all has its effect. At the same time, people, might want to poo-poo the swim, but you come out of the swim 10 or 15 minutes before the next person, that's a mile and a half on the run for somebody. And you think how hard it is to catch somebody and give them a mile and a half lead coming out of T2. And again, it's all cumulative. It's all about how you execute. It's all about how you think through the day. And that's, again, why it's not thinking through how you're going to execute the day and not just going through the motions, not just making everything easy and slow all the time. That's, again, why we'll do those negative split runs. And that's why, on longer bike rides, you'll put in the effort, because you're probably going to put in the effort on race day, and you need to teach your body how to recover and be like, it's okay for me to feel like this. It's okay for things to hurt, because I'm going to rally and I'm going to end up feeling really good later on in the day. And I think it's just another great thing for athletes to focus on in terms of not just going through the motions in training. It needs to have a purpose, and things need to accumulate, not just fitness-wise, but your mental and emotional decision-making and the memories that you have from being able to execute or rally or not just to make it through, but to be strong. And I think that's just something that we often overlook as athletes, in that, I remember I made it through this run and I was just tired the whole time. That's great. It's still a great thing to have. But it's a different mentality to have, and it's a different memory and thought process to have, to feel like, I remember finishing this thing strong. I was able to rally and gather myself and finish this ride strong, finish this swim strong, finish this run strong. And those are the ones you want to take with you into race day. It's not, I remember I was just able to suffer and be slow for 3.5 hours on this 25-mile-an-hour run, which is just totally ridiculous. You got to remember these. You'll just remember the ones that help you strong. You don't remember the ones I know I'm going to have to suffer. So, because I think what it does, it sets you up for making bad decisions earlier in the race. I know the run's going to suck, so I might as well just smash the bike, right? Yeah. Because I know the run. Everybody says that. You'll see it. I'll be in Wisconsin. I'll be spectating and coaching. I'm not racing. You will see people with that mentality of they'll be walking the first mile or two of the run, and they're doing it on purpose, because they've told themselves, you know what, the run's going to suck anyway. It's going to be so I just got to smash the bike, and then they're going to start walking. And I'm telling you, if you can run the majority of the back half of an Ironman marathon, you're in for an awesome day. But so many athletes convince themselves that they can't, or that it's just going to be slow, instead of we're just getting started. Because what happens is an athlete, even if because it's almost impossible. It's not impossible, obviously, but a lot of athletes you will see that can't do this is you never want to think about negative splitting a marathon. You just think about keeping it even. Start with an 8-minute pace or whatever that might feel like a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10, and then the name of the game now is just to raise your effort to maintain that. And if you can, raise your effort level to a 10, and you've gotten to mile 18 or 20, and you're just now using that 10 effort to maintain that pace, you're in for a great day. But most athletes you'll see drop significantly in that back half from you're cruising along at a 10-minute mile, and then that drops to an 11 and a half. That's an almost 20-minute difference on just the back half of the marathon versus just keeping pace. And so, again, like there's so many. It's a message in restraint. It's a message in execution, and preparing yourself in training to be able to make those decisions and to wait long and to trust yourself. But that's ultimately what it comes down to, is trust. Is trusting yourself, trusting the game plan, trusting the training, and feeling like, you know what, I do know if I stick to the plan. Because again, it contradicts every societal message that we get right now, in that the result and the feedback and the good feelings have to come right now. I have to have it right now. If it's not right now, it's probably not going to happen, and it's not going to be worth it. Versus that decision-making process now, it's like, I want good right now so it can be great later. Or I trust that it's going to be good, so I need to stick to the plan and watch these things develop over the course of the entire day, and then set myself up for success to be the best that I can today.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I've always kind of done, I feel like in races, is sometimes you get in a pocket where, kind of early in the bike or early in the run, where you're like, oh man, I feel good, I'm cruising it. And I usually don't wear a watch. I will put a bike computer on and kind of go by that. But like sometimes when I feel like, oh man, I'm flying and feel good, that's when I pull back. It's like early, it's just sort of a psychological move that I always try to make. It's like, well, I'm going too fast. And it's a weird one, but like you're saying, I think especially early, because it's so easy to come out of there, even on the run, after taper, and you haven't done a lot and your legs may feel fresh, and by mile 5 or 6 you're going to be like, whoa, I've got it. I'm going to start putting it down. And that's exactly when I pull back. Because it's so tempting to just kind of let it go, but it's just, and I'm not saying that's not a good strategy towards the end of the race, but like early on, I always feel like, man, this feels good, I'm rolling really good, pull it back. Pull it back.
It's crazy what happens when you use like common sense. And that, I think, is like the most so it's the most surprising thing as a coach, I think, in that. And so like athletes, if like an athlete inquires like they have like a more specific mentality, it's like, how are we going to get there? Like there's not like some magic outline when like specific. It's like, you're going to swim, bike, and run, and we're going to do it progressively. And I'm never going to put the cart before the horse in terms of pushing you farther than I think you need and can go. Just based on the fact that you feel like you have to do it because you're behind. Like I talked to an athlete the weekend. I was like, listen, like one of my number one core values as a coach is that I will always make a decision on what I believe is in your long-term interest, and I will never sacrifice that for your short-term outcome. And you can not like me if you want to, you can question me if you want to, you can doubt me if you want to, but if you're wanting to train for a marathon and you consistently show me week after week after week, you can't make it over an hour and a half or hour and 45 minutes without being so super sore and you can't make it, or you can't, or something comes up and you can't fit it in your schedule, I'm not going to throw a 2.5 hour run in there just because. Like, I'm not going to sacrifice your a short-term risk, for what I feel like is best for you long-term. And it's not rocket. I think like, that's this again, like a societal problem that we have right now, is everyone thinks there's like these 10 steps to become, or there's this 6-minute, resolution that's going to solve your problems, and it has to be written out. And everyone now, because the information superhighway, or most oftentimes what's the misinformation superhighway of the internet, allows everyone to feel like they're empowered to make these quick decisions and be informed immediately, and that it's the right decision because it can be black and white, right? Except that training an athlete is often gray, in that you never know what someone's truly capable of until they start to achieve it. And you can't plan everything. And again, in a world where we like to plan and everything, and we want to know the result and the outline of how we're going to get there in every single step of the way before you even get there, it makes, I think, coaching very difficult for some athletes to kind of wrap their head around. Is that, like, listen, it's the same thing that people have been doing for like over 100 years. Like, it's not like some super rocket science thing. It's like you swim, you bike, you run, you're consistent, you try to distribute the training and the intensity between these two, zones predominantly. And although there will be like, you'll undulate in the volume, the intensity throughout the year. And when you get close to a race, and there are some, some differences in each athlete. Like I just find it interesting that I feel like, at least for me, when I see other coaches' workouts and training plans and stuff, I'm like, oh my God, it's like rocket science. Yeah. But that's the normal. And the fact that the majority, I would say, of the workouts that I give are like super simple and sometimes monotonous and sometimes repetitive, which is, I think, totally great. It's like people think that's like madness when the opposite is actually true, that's how most training should look like. And it's like the crazy variety, epic workouts, always changing, that seem to like people seem to gravitate towards that. I think it's fun to not know what you're capable of until you get there. And then even when you get there, you should feel like, gosh, if I can keep doing this, I don't even know what I'm capable of. Like, and I think that's the fun part, right? It's like, if I'm doing this to get better, and that's always the point, is to be smart and be successful and allow yourself to be in this sport with some long-term sustainability. And that's how you achieve success, right? It's like, it's not overnight. But everyone wants overnight. They want to feel it. Then they want this like one workout that's going to tell them. But and the reality is like you want them to look at the, so many. When I was watching the show last night, I think before I went to bed, it was like, it was a chef's table, and they were talking about a chef, and she said, "I was zoomed in for so long, I needed to zoom out." And I think that athletes, that's such a great phrase for athletes that try to stay zoomed in on these like finite specific things day in and day out, for the good and the bad. So many times just need to zoom out and look at the big picture of how far they come and how they're succeeding, and not look at everything in a vacuum, but look at it as in how it's been created and what they've created over time. And if they continue to do that and don't deviate, and they're patient, then there really is no expiration date. There really is no end date. There really is no cap on what they can achieve, because they're always going to be on that curve of constantly, progressively getting better. And that can often look the same. It can often look repetitive. It'll sometimes seem boring, and it'll sometimes hurt. But if you have that approach, then that's the fun part. You just never know. You just keep getting better, and then your expectations, if you have them, or your perception of what's possible, changes fluidly.
Well, that's really the hard part, right? I don't want to say it's easy to do an Ironman, but like, we've seen it countless times where people can, pull everything out of their hat and go and do their first Ironman and, quote unquote, be successful. But then, I'm sure you see this all the time as a coach. Then what? Mm-hmm. So what you're saying to me is something that's taken me a long time to recognize, is that looking at things from the big perspective and in the doing those, workouts over and over. I did that. Like whenever I tell somebody I just had a long swim, and they're like, "How many laps is that?" And I'll be like, 70 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they'll be like, "Oh my God, isn't that boring?" And my first inclination is like, yeah. But then I'm like, no, because, and well, I'm figuring out how to not make that boring, because what happens is the key to swimming, in my opinion, is to sort of just get locked in and just be in the moment. And of course, that's the key to everything in the whole race day, is being in the moment, right? It's just being in the groove, breathing, and just embracing what's happening right now. Because the minute you start getting out ahead of yourself and trying to think about how far you actually have to go, that's when you start getting into trouble. And to me, I've found, especially when I can get in a groove with swimming, it's really enjoyable just to be one with the water and doing laps over and over, and then when I do start to get in that groove, I totally lose track of the whole situation, and it's a flow state, and I think that's what people always talk about, is like, how do you get into that? And for me, it's all about pulling back and just mentally understanding and figuring out ways to just get to the next wall, whatever it is, get to the next 5 miles, and like we were talking about earlier. And it doesn't have to be boring. It can be the exciting process of just sort of like it's almost like opening a present, man, like at the end of it, because you just, like you said, you just kind of keep going through, and you're like, man, I'm just keep doing these same things or whatever they may be, and they seem so, everyone wants to always put boring tags on this stuff, but when something's boring, that's something that's going on inside your own mind. It's like, oh, this is boring. Well, figure out how to make it more enjoyable, and then it pays off in the long process. And in the race, I mean, it's just like those little things are all part of it. And I think that when we lose our initial like excitement over what we're doing, it's like the old adage is like, man, that was exciting signing up for my first Ironman, and then it's like, oh, now I got to actually do it. I used to do, like, I told that story a long time ago about how I used to, like, me and my buddies would always go out, and when I first started drumming, and I formed like 4 or 5 bands, like in a weekend one time, because it was so fun to think about, like, but like the reality is you got to start practicing, and you got to start writing songs and actually doing stuff, and that's not as fun as just kind of visualizing this metal around your neck or whatever.
Dude, it's the coffee shop combo.
Yeah, man.
You can go walk into a coffee shop.
I just started a new business today.
You do, man. You walk into a coffee shop, and 90% of the tables are the meetings that are going to create the next big thing, whether it's real estate or some like vitamin pyramid scheme, or writing the new song with the new producer. It is. It's like, and I actually think like that's kind of what coffee shops are neat to go into, because they're so positively energetic, because everyone is insanely optimistic, right? You walk into a coffee shop and everybody is about it. It's like they get home, they're like, babe, we're gonna do it, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't as exciting anymore when I have to actually, I don't know, like, work through things that don't come easy, or figure out how to keep it going, or how to figure out like so so for me, for example, before I got into coaching, like one of my biggest struggles with jobs, like full-time jobs, is that I'm a fixer. Like I that's how my brain works. I like to fix problems. That's what keeps me super engaged. That's what gets me super motivated, is to just help people fix problems, help businesses fix problems, help like the best things I ever did work-wise of a career before I got into coaching full-time was helping resurrect these businesses that were doing really poorly. And I came in, and I love it. I love figuring out what's not working, figuring out ways to make it work, and I'll bend over backwards to make things better. But then after I would do that, I was like, bored. Listen, I'm like, what's next? Like, what do you mean this is like, and I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that's how my brain works. But now, obviously, with coaching, it's like there's a problem every day. So it keeps me sometimes way too many, but it keeps me super engaged, because you're always tinkering, you're always trying to figure out, because that is the point. Is in coaching, it's like your main goal is to always figure out how to be better. It's never just, you're never satiated and satisfied to think, this is where we need to be. We're all done, because to the other degree of like sometimes not appreciating how far you come is as coaches, like when you do an athlete and they have like this gigantic breakthrough, that they may have only seen like one door of possibility that's ever going to be open, is that like this athlete that I started to work with this year for the first time. She just had another race this weekend, and she had never been on the podium in her entire life. And this year, I think she's like 3 for 3. And she's getting another race this weekend, and she's just like, I mean, her consistency has been the biggest difference. It has had very little to do with me, but just her ability and focus and commitment to being consistent. And as she's done this, she's obviously been able to reap all these rewards. But like, when you think like you can only be on the podium once, or you can only have this time, you only have one door to go through. But now once an athlete like bursts through that door, and every athlete has this, they burst through it, and now instead of only one door being, it's like, oh, there's like 16. Now the possibilities are endless. And so like athletes, your work is never done. And I think that's why I love coaching so much too, is that like your work with athletes is never finished, because it's always, like you said, it's always like, what's next? All right, this was a great race, but I think I can do better. Like, it's like we always have that, like, and I have that as a coach too. Sometimes I have to kind of reel myself back in, is like to appreciate too, like how far, I've come with some athletes, and how far we've come together, I guess is a better way to say it, in that, like, don't always, like, you can't always look forward, right? Because if you do, you just forget you always got to look back. Like, you don't want to turn around and face it, but you got to always have rear view mirrors to look back and see how far you've come, and then remember and see the roadmap of how you got there, right? And it was patience, it was consistency, it was an athlete that's doing Wisconsin. He's like, every time he races, he improves, and he's in his 60s, and he's like, dude, I could be like the poster child for your zone 2 running with the occasional hard work to, like, that's how you get faster. And I just think sometimes when you're always focused on the next big thing, again, you kind of forget sometimes how you got there, which is a perspective, I think, that also helps to concrete what you're currently doing and how you got there and why it's still working, right? And not, we got to change things up. It's not working. Like, you have like 1 or 2 bad weeks, and you're like, you know what? My body's changed. Everything is totally different. I got to change things up. Like, no. Stay the course. Show some restraint. It's okay. Just keep moving forward instead of making drastic decisions, because I don't know anyone who's ever made a drastic decision and come back and be like, you know what? That was the best thing that I ever did. Was it drastic? Maybe not drastic, but impulsive, I guess is a better way to put it. Impulsive decision based on a minute, right? Like, I was joking on the last podcast about the athlete who's like, dude, coach, I did like some strength training this morning, went out and ran today. Game changer. Like, like, instead of looking back and be like, oh, I don't know, it was actually like my first recovery week, and I had done like 30, 35, 40 mile run weeks, and I'm running more than I've ever had in my entire life. Oh, maybe that's it. Like, we always think like immediately. It's the immediacy of everything. And again, that's a societal thing we have now. It's that it has to be explainable. There has to be an answer, and has to be right now. When so many times it's often like, all right, let's remember body of work, okay, and see what's actually adding up and resulting in good things. And again, this is one of the hardest things as well for coaches and athletes alike, is staying the course and not just jumping to a conclusion that it's not working or that it's working perfectly. It's just being open and confident. And again, when it comes to racing and training and life, everything in between, it's you got to have like those core principles that you go back to, and like, all right, it's kind of like a checklist. Is it a good decision? Is it a good decision? Like, what's that saying with about like talking? Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said by me right now? And like, if you go through those checklists, you're like, yes, then yes, it does. But usually you get to like the third one, you're like, man, not really. So maybe I should just keep my mouth shut and not say anything. Like, yeah. Be like, like that should probably be like the feed you had, like the the amount of questions you have to go through on Facebook. It's like, does it need to be posted? Does it need to be posted by me? But does it need to be posted by me right now? And most of the time you probably get to the third one, you're like, yeah, probably not. I'm just going to pass, get back to work. But it is like you said, it's the hardest thing to do is understand, again, when you have so many like bells and whistles and fancy things being thrown at you these days, and buzzwords and quote unquote hacks that everyone seems to gravitate towards, that it's hard to be in that camp. And that's why I'm so thankful and understand the amount of patience and trust that it takes the athletes that I work with to have, because I want the results to be exciting. I don't really care if the workouts are. And that is contradictory to everything in society and also a lot of training, is that people want their PRs or in training, and they're trained to be exciting. And yeah, I think you should be excited about it, but I want you to be excited about getting better. And I don't think you should care what that looks like. It's about the end result. It's about absolutely squeezing every single ounce of performance and ability out of an athlete, given their total athlete environment and their ability to execute right now. And that's always going to change. It's always going to be different. But that's what the name of the game should be. And it's more oftentimes going to be methodical and repetitive and not so exciting. But again, like it's not a secret. Like, it's like the best kept secret. That's not a secret. Is that's like the best way to succeed and get great fitness and achieve great results and do it for a long period of time.
Yeah, well, you've seen it many, many times, and you've seen what works. And the athletes that stay that way and keep at it seem to have the best long-term, not only growth, but like satisfaction from the sport, it seems like to me from the outside.
I mean, the longer you're in it, the more likely you are to achieve the success you never thought you could have or the success you've always wanted.
Right, and then, once you see certain things, you break through the door and you see them, then it gets easier. And then comes a whole new set of challenges, right?
Yep.
So it never ends.
And speaking of challenges, I got to give a giant shout out to our athlete, Chet Dilliday.
Oh, man. No kidding, Chet.
If you want to talk about, like, proud moments and moments that, like, leave you in awe, so, like, just another example of, like, how much of, like, a roller coaster of emotions it is to track more than one athlete at a race. I had 2 first-time athletes competing, three first-timers at Mont Tremblant for their first Ironman ever. Everyone finished. One was back for a repeat. He PR'd. Everyone finished. Sean was on the podium. Lacey did awesome and finished her first one with like an insane travel schedule. That's like beyond me how you could even like complete an Ironman. But Chad Dilliday is an athlete of ours who is just totally beloved, a great man, and he. It's interesting because he and I are so very different in so many ways. But I think that's kind of. It's like opposites attract, but sometimes, they don't, but we do. And he is like the most like specific and particular individual that I know. And he was going to this race, and I was super excited for him. He drove up to Mont Tremblant, and he sent me this really awesome text the day before. And he, I gotta say though, real quick, like it's I love the fact that, and it's interesting just as like a reflection, because I want to practice what I preach, but it's kind of interesting, like when you share like pre-race text messages with like, grown men and women, and they're like, "Yeah, I love you." It's like, "Yeah, dude, love you right back." It's like, I never thought I'd have a job like that. That's why I love it so much. But anyway, he's racing, and I give him these power numbers. He's like, "Listen, coach, I think I could go higher, but this is my first one, so I can promise you I'm going to go by your numbers no matter what." No matter what. And the thing is I believe him. Like, even to the extent that if I was like way off and my projections were totally, I just did a piss poor job, he would have stuck with it, even if it meant he was going like 5 miles an hour, right? He would have stuck with it because he was that focused on executing the plan. And so anyway, he gets out, has a good swim, he gets out of the water, and his first split, I'm like, something's up. I either effed up royally. And then I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? Because I know it's any other athlete have been like, hey, you know what? They'll figure it out. They'll start pushing it. Their power meter's not working right. It's all good. But it's not, because it's Chet. And if he's going 7 miles an hour up a hill and he's going to go over his watt range, he'll get off and walk it because he's trying to execute the plan. And I'm like, dude, my coach, like, Robbie, you totally blown it. Like, you have totally 100% blown it. You gave him these horrible power numbers, and he's just sticking to the plan because he's Chet. And so the next split was also slow, and I was thinking, you know what? Something's not right. And I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't know what. And again, like, that's like the perils and the greatness of the Ironman tracker these days, is that it's usually so on it that you get updates, you just don't know what's reality and what's not, and your mind goes like a million different, areas. But anyway, But he gets off the bike, and his wife's there, and I was messaging her on Facebook, and she was like, "Yeah, he got off the bike. He had a bike wreck." And he was still moving, and I knew this as soon as she said bike wreck that it and I said she said, "I think it happened towards the end," and I said, I think it actually happened within the first 7 kilometers, because the first split on Iron Track was 7 kilometers, and it was so slow. And as soon as she said wreck, I said, "There's no way he bikes that slow. It's just not possible." And she said, and I said, "I think it happened the first mile, even, or first 5 miles max of the bike." And it was the first mile. He gets I haven't talked to him on the phone, but he messaged me, and he is at Tremblant doing his first Ironman, has a bike wreck at mile 1, and breaks 2 ribs. Okay, finishes the bike, gets off. And this shouldn't be like an advertisement. It's just like as I've always told him, like, your toughness and stubbornness are both your strengths and weaknesses. But he told his wife when he got off the bike to have his medical card ready when he finished, because he broke his ribs. And he goes and finishes the race, and obviously a lot slower than he wanted to, but just I don't know, dude. I can tell you one thing though, that wouldn't have been me.
No kidding, man.
Come on, dude. I'm out. Like, I'd love to say, like, oh man, totally would have been me. Like, I'd have toughed it out, brother. Nah, man, I'd have packed it in. I'm like, well, you're 1 mile from transition. Go back, get some medical attention, call it a day, come back out. But he wasn't. He wanted it so bad. He didn't care about the time. He just wanted to finish. And so I got to give huge props to him. He probably was, slightly stubborn, but. Well, a lot stubborn, but I just think it in the spirit of resiliency and patience and throwing expectations out the window, it was about completing something that you started, and I think that was the most thing that was important to him, was completing what he started, no matter how it looked, or obviously how it felt, because it didn't feel good. But I got a massive amount of props for anybody who can do that. I know athletes do that all the time. You always see, again, like if you're going to watch a race, you always see people coming into transition out on the run with, like, road rash and stuff here and there. And dude, like, what? Like, well done. Like, like that's when you see somebody and you see that's all you care about is the effort. You don't care about the result. You don't care about the expectation. You just care about the effort. And I think just remembering that is such a great lesson for us all. But yeah, so a huge congratulations to everybody who raced and finished this weekend. But big shout out to him for really. It's incredible, man. Like,
you break your ribs.
My ribs before, but like how hard it was to breathe and then handling your bike. And there's, I don't even know, like, if it's even possible to be in aero position with 2 broken. It really is. It's I don't want to say it's fascinating, because that makes it sound like it was something awesome, but
on mile 1 of that bike course, you got to look forward to that.
Like, you could probably still hear, like, people in T1 like cheering, and you're like, instead of going back and getting treated, I'm going to go farther away and make things more difficult. But yeah, anyway, so big shout out to him again. Congrats to everyone who finished, and I heard it's an incredible venue and a beautiful place to race and a unrelenting course. But yeah, bunch of races coming up down the pipe. You got Traverse City this weekend, inaugural 70.3. Be interested to see what the feedback is from that event, and what's supposed to be a pretty cool city. Expensive city, but pretty cool city up there in Michigan. And Maine this weekend as well. A bunch of other races, and then you got Santa Cruz 70.3, I think, is the next week or so, and then you got Wisconsin. We'll be up there. Pumped about that, and I'm gonna be at home for the next 2 weeks, which is like awesome.
Yeah, settle in, recover yourself.
Yeah. And get back up to Madison.
Get up to Madison.
Favorite cities. And but yeah, that is it. That is all she wrote. It is Tuesday. Again, we appreciate your patience. We appreciate you sticking around, and we appreciate you listening. We'll be back on Thursday. If you haven't checked it out, please do head over to crushingiron.com. It is kind of our one-stop shop for all things training, coaching, swim analysis, our blog, gear, club membership, camps, you name it, it's there. Check it out. If you have any questions about things you can't find or questions about things you do see, you can always email Mike directly, crushingiron@gmail.com, or you can always email me directly as well, C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, everybody. Thanks for being awesome. Thanks for listening. This has been podcast number 295, Crushing Iron. All right, buddy. I guess I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. See you, buddy.
See you, man.